Welcome to another episode of Bucket List Coach Web Show Live. Well, hello, this is Cindy Lee, your host at Bucket List Coach Web Show Live, and I'll get to my guest in just 1 minute. So my name is Cindy Lee. I'm based out of Southern California. I started this podcast in 2017. 5 years ago, coming up in November, will be my 5th year anniversary. So a little background story. I'm originally from Northern California. I live near Travis Air Force Base, and when I was 16 years old, probably the only 16-year-old that got excited about that C-5 flying right over my head. In 1986, I worked for the Mare Island there in Vallejo, right outside of San Francisco. And I was a naval shipyard trainee. I worked on the submarine, I ground, I buckhead, I did it all. And that same year is when Top Gun came out. And that is when I fell in love with the F-14 Tomcat. So almost 5 years ago, I was on Instagram. I met this amazing gentleman called Lorenzo with the F-14 podcast. And he says, I have a guy for you, Gerald Leekey Leekster. And today we're talking about civilian machines. Let's get into it. How are you, Leekster?
Great. Happy to be here, Cindy. Thanks.
So I'm going to pop off real quick, and I'm going to share this in a couple of Facebook groups, and go ahead and tell your aviation story, and then we'll go into the planes. I'll be right back.
All right. Started in civil aviation. So I started very humbly working on airplanes, pumping gas, cleaning airplanes, and then eventually throwing bags for a major airline, which was kind of exciting for me. In college, where I was working on all my flight ratings, my private pilot's license, instrument rating, those things, hoping that I would get a chance to fly in the military before I went to the airlines. But my long-term plan was to be an airline pilot. So lucky for me, I got picked up by the Navy after multiple rejection letters from the Air Force and the Navy, but I kept applying, and they eventually picked me up, which was amazing. One of the best days of my life. And then I went to officer school and went to flight school, and eventually ended up flying the F-14, where I did a couple combat deployments for Desert Storm, and went to Bosnia, went to Somalia, went back to Iraq, things like that. And eventually became a flight instructor in the military for a couple of years. Went to the Naval Postgraduate School, where I studied to be an accident investigator, and where they taught us a lot about engineering and human factors and safety, and you became kind of a safety nerd. And I really enjoyed that part of aviation, understanding the human-machine interface and what causes us, things that help us perform better, and things that helping us understand when we have failures. And we always try to learn in aviation from every accident. So I really enjoy that part of my job, where, in fact, I was given the opportunity a couple of years later to do safety consulting for some major oil companies. I worked for the big ones all over the world, wherever they have an oil rig poking holes in the ground trying to find oil. There's a high risk work going on where people get injured or things get broken, or you have potential for climate style pollution catastrophe. So I enjoyed teaching human factors and working with those folks. And now at that time, when I left the military, I applied to the airlines, where I got to fly. I've had a good 30 plus year career as an airline pilot now, where I got to fly everything from the old DC-8s to most of the Boeing airplanes and Airbus 320, and now I'm a captain on the 777, which is kind of the pinnacle of my career, which I'm enjoying now. So Yeah, good
So let's
times.
start with the 777.
The Triple's an amazing airplane. It was originally designed to replace the 747, like 100s and 200s. A lot of the uh, folks in the industry were a little skeptical about going down to two engines for long haul overwater airplanes, and there was some some criticism about that design. But eventually, the FAA and everybody came on board when we saw the reliability, and they did the extended overwater operations tests on the 777. So it kind of blazed the way for all the manufacturers to go down to two engines, and the efficiency gains and the cost savings that they have gotten from operating 777s versus a 747 is just tremendous. So nowadays you have 747, 400s, 800s, and the A380s out there flying ultra long haul, carrying, they call those super heavies. They call a 777 heavy, and they call an A380 and a 747 a super heavy. They are pretty efficient when you get to routes that are over maybe 12 hours, 12 to 14 hours. And they can carry a lot of folks and a lot of cargo, but they burn a ton of gas. So they have to do the long haul, the super long haul, to get very efficient. Whereas a 777 can be extremely efficient from, probably a 2 hour to a 14-hour flight. And we carry a ton of freight on top of it. That's the difference now. Is you see some of these operators that are moving towards an Airbus or a 737 for Trans-Pacific going to Hawaii or going across to Europe. But they're right at the absolute limits of their performance. They can carry passengers and bags and fuel, but no cargo. And many times they're leaving passengers behind or leaving cargo behind, depending on the winds, the temperatures, and the length of the runway. So a lot of folks don't realize when you go to a place like Maui or Kauai and you have a shorter runway and it gets hot outside and they're trying to go there from, say, Phoenix or from Las Vegas, even Los Angeles when it's hot, we might not be able to put all the passengers on the airplane at times. And winds across the North Atlantic in the winter can get up to 200 miles an hour. You have hurricanes that you have to go around, things like that. So narrow body airplanes become kind of pushed into a corner based on that type of performance. Whereas, large airplanes, 767, 777, 747s, they're designed for those long flights, and you can put all the people on, all the gas on, and then usually you can put on another 50 to 20 to 80,000 pounds of freight on top of all that. So you can imagine, I don't know what an airline charges per pound for freight. I would imagine it's somewhere in the $1 to $2 a pound range. But when you start talking about 80,000 pounds, that might pay just for the operation of that flight alone without any passengers. So it becomes a revenue generator for the airlines that can't be done somewhere else. The 777 holds. We have different models out there around the world. They hold anywhere from, say, 220 passengers up to 400 and something passengers. Typically, the airlines like to operate them in the 300 and something because they'll put in a 2-class or a 3-class cabin. But that's totally up to the airline to how they want to operate the airplane. So
here's your Instagram. So you have some stuff on here. You have some fun activity. Oh, wow. Look at that photo right there. Wow. What year was that right there?
That was probably 1997. And
there she is right there.
Yeah, some beautiful opportunities to get some photos. I love photography, so I like to take a lot of pictures, and the airplanes are great for that because I love airplanes, so I can't help myself. Yeah, the job's great. We'll talk about. I wanted to talk a little bit about transitioning. Used to be that at the airlines, 75% of the pilots at major carriers were military pilots. That's not the case anymore. It's probably down around 20% now. Part of the reason is because of airline expansion has just gone crazy. But the other reason is because the military is downsized so dramatically, and they're just not training as many pilots anymore. So there's not that many airline pilots coming from the military anymore. Just a few.
I've been meeting a lot lately. Like I had a flight theater day, and the first officer and the captain were both Air Force trained.
Yeah, so it's not uncommon that you get that, but from a new hire standpoint of what they're hiring these days, they're just simply not available. So the airlines love to hire military pilots, and it's not because they're better pilots necessarily. Although I would love to say that as an ex-military guy, the reality is that in the military, they weed out a lot of folks very early on. Like, you have to learn very quickly because it's a cost efficiency thing, and they build these pipelines of military pilots to get through very rapidly. So if you're not keeping up, then they usually send you home. Whereas in a civilian aviation, if you're a little slower to learn, you can just pay more money and keep learning, and then eventually you'll get your ratings. So that doesn't mean that in the end that you don't create the same level of proficiency or skill level as a pilot at the airlines. I've flown with many civilian pilots that I learned a lot from, that were just as good or better than many of the military pilots that I flew with. So the civilian pilots do crazy things. They fly up in Alaska, they fly to Pacific Islands, they fly in the Bahamas, they learn how to fly in old DC-3s and do all, maybe seaplanes. Almost all of us have stories that are interesting to hear by the time you get to the airlines. And the U.S. airlines typically, on average, are hiring pilots out of the military. You might have fighter pilots that have lower time because the sorties each flight is only an hour and a half long, an hour long, whereas civilian pilots typically have at least twice as much actual flying time, but much of that is within the air traffic control system. So typical civilian pilots hired at a major carrier have at least, I would say on average, by the time they get to a major carrier like United or Delta, they have about between 4,000 and 7,000 hours of total flight time. And whereas a military pilot may have somewhere between 1,500 and 4,000 hours, depending on if they flew heavies, transport style, or fighter style aircraft. So, yeah, I mean, you talk about F-22 pilots, F-35 pilots. If you're not in a deployment phase where you might be off, fighting, doing some sort of deployment overseas, in the deployment phase, you're going to fly a lot. When you're at home on a training phase, you might fly 5 to 25 hours a month. A 25-hour month being at home, not on a deployment, would be a really good month. So they're not flying nearly as much as a civilian who goes out there and flies for a commuter airline that's getting maybe 100 hours a month. So that's kind of the difference. Now the intensity is different as well. When you're flying for a commuter airline, you spend a lot of time on autopilot in the air traffic control system, whereas in the military, every mission is a different situation. So.
Well, I like to talk about turbulence and just let my audience know that these planes can handle a lot. I recently had a trip to Miami and Bahamas, and I was like, this thing is going down. But I heard from some of my aviation people that plane could actually handle a lot. But I actually got really sick. That was the very first time that I've gotten sick from a plane, and it was Denver to Santa Ana. So let's talk about those air pockets, what's causing the major
right. Yeah, I mean, the airplane designs are amazing. They're not going to break from turbulence. Yeah, that just doesn't happen. So unless you have a small airplane that flies directly into a thunderstorm, then you could probably you could lose the airplane. Now, an airliner with radar and air traffic control and all that other stuff, we typically avoid thunderstorms. Our avoidance, we avoid thunderstorms by a policy. Most airlines, I want to say, is about 20 miles. So we actually stay well clear of them. Sometimes we have to penetrate some nasty weather as we're coming into land or whatever. But if there's wind shear, we're not even going to try to land. We're going to go to a divert. So no airline pilot gets paid to take chances. They get paid to say no, right?
How about
Pardon me?
I was in a 737, and yeah, it was moving.
It's awful, right? So typically, what you probably experienced may have been a combination of weather and what we call mountain wave turbulence. And over the Rocky Mountains, you get the jet stream blowing across the mountains at sometimes 150, 200 miles an hour. But even if a wind is blowing at 50 to 100 miles an hour, it hits those mountains and it kind of gets pushed up and then it rolls. It kind of rolls through the air. So as the airplane is moving through that rolling air, it can get very violent sometimes. And if it's clear air turbulence that comes off mountain wave, there's almost no way to predict it. You can't see it. The radar is not going to pick it up. So there's almost no way to predict that with our current technology. But we do use other aircraft that are constantly reporting where the best rides are and where the worst rides are. And sometimes you just get into some bad turbulence and you've got airplanes above you and airplanes below you. And you can't.
There's a whole bunch below us, yes.
So you can't, they won't let you descend. Air traffic control says, no, you're stuck with that altitude. And unless sometimes if you declare an emergency, you might be able to do that. But that's not really an emergency per se, unless it's getting to the point of where you're concerned about the passengers getting injured, which we always try to tell people, hey, keep that seatbelt fastened because we don't know when it's going to happen. And when we do know it's going to happen, we tell our flight attendants to get seat. We have all these policies in place, standard operating procedures, and a lot of our training, and when we go to training as airline pilots, we usually go annually, but we have quarterly training as well. And every single training that we do addresses turbulence because the airline gets sued if somebody gets hurt, and they just pushing it into our heads all the time. Do whatever you can to avoid turbulence. And I don't like being in turbulence. I definitely don't like being in violent turbulence. And I definitely don't want one of my passengers or my crew getting injured because I operated the airplane in a place that I don't want to be. So as an airline pilot, I'm doing every single thing that I can do to avoid that turbulence, including not taking off. So if that's the reports that I'm getting for severe, I'm not going to take off into it until I know that I can safely fly the airplane.
I probably should have did that. But when we left from Miami going into Denver, I tell you what, landing into Denver was like landing on a cloud. It didn't even seem like they landed on the tarmac. It was so smooth. But the other way, we had a hard land. And just to let everybody know, if you don't know a lot about airplanes, when there is a wind factor, it can be a tough land. For instance, going into Las Vegas, not my favorite. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, Las Vegas can be challenging. I would say, honestly, the worst clear air turbulence I ever had was taking off out of Las Vegas. And I was shocked at how violent it was. And it was sharp and quick, like boom, 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 boom. And it was like that right after takeoff all the way up to 11,000 feet. And as soon as we got through 11,000 feet, it went smooth as glass. All of a sudden, it just stopped. It was the weirdest thing. It was very uncomfortable. I couldn't read the instruments hardly. The airplane was shaking so violently. What we do in those cases is typically try to slow the airplane down airspeed wise and climbing as rapidly as possible to try and get above it. So Vegas is its own kind of thing. Phoenix is very similar. When you have bad weather come into those areas during the rainy seasons, it can be a little bit violent. All that's kind of accentuated by the mountainous terrain that's around there.
Yes.
And when you have high mountains around an airport, like Denver, for example, Denver's on the flat side of the Rockies, but you can't go west, right? Because the mountains are there. So once you descend down, you're kind of stuck going off to the east. So if you have weather on the east side, you got mountains on the other side, you kind of end up between a rock and a hard place, if you will. So you have limited options in places like that when you have weather. And terrain is also something that we train to all the time. You know, taking off in those kind of airports in the simulator is typically they love to give us engine failures in high terrain so that we have to demonstrate that we can operate the airplane safely and escape those, go to what we call escape routes to get the airplane out of the mountainous terrain when you have a lower performance from an engine failure. So it's pretty challenging, and that's something we practice every time we go to training.
Well, we have about 10 minutes left on the show. We have a short show today, and I want to do a shout out to Taco. What would you like to say about him?
Yeah, Taco's doing great. You know, Mitch is he's now a instructor pilot, and I want to say he's on the 787, so he's kind of a big deal. You know, he's in the last 5 years of his career, and he's going to spend that time passing his 40 years of aviation knowledge on to other folks and working with them, trying to get the best out of people. I mean, that's his job, is to challenge people in the simulator and get them to perform at their highest. And if they need extra work, then he's there to help them out. So yeah, it's a lot of fun. He really enjoys that. You know, he's a C-130 guy, so he spent his life in a crew aircraft environment. And that's a lot different than folks like that flew F-16s or F-15s, where A-10s, for example, Harriers, all those planes where you came from single seat to a multi-crew environment is a different way of flying. And if you put two people together, I'm sure everybody knows this from when you're driving a car and you have two people trying to drive the car. It doesn't always work out too good. You know what I mean? So one person has to let the other person drive, and they have to offer information that helps them drive better. Hey, you're going to turn right after this light. It's going to be immediately after this traffic light. You're going to turn right. Okay, thanks. I have it in sight. You know, that kind of communication is what goes on inside the cockpit when you have a first officer, captain, or what we call pilot flying and pilot and non-flying pilot. So the first officer might be the one that's flying the airplane. The captain might be the non-flying pilot talking on the radio and offering assistance so that the other person can perform at their highest level. What you don't want to be is distracting and offering the wrong information that can cause people to be distracted and make errors. So we spend a lot of time on those standard communication skills and what we're allowed to say to each other in certain environments. We're not allowed to talk, for example, to each other below 10,000 feet above the ground. So that's what we call our sterile period, from the time we release the brakes until we climb up above 10,000, and then when we start our descent to when we penetrate that 10,000 foot above ground till we get to the gate and shut down the engines. Those are our highest threat areas when we're operating. So we don't want to say, hey, did you see the Cubs won last night? Yeah. Finally. We're not allowed to discuss anything other than the business of operating the aircraft. Wow. During the sterile period. In fact, the flight attendants are even notified that we're in sterile when we pass through there, and they're not supposed to call us unless it's something really important, extremis, fire, smoke in the cabin, some sort of security issue, whatever. But typically they're told, hey, during the sterile period, don't bother the cockpit with, hey, we need more Cokes when we get on the ground, those kind of things. Or even a maintenance issue.
Oh yeah, maintenance. Yeah. So another shout out, and then we'll talk about maintainers. CJ Heatley. I want to do a shout out to him, and only because today is Global Photography Day. What would you like to say about him?
Oh, he's one of my favorite people, of course, because he was an F-14 pilot, not only an F-14 pilot, the F-14 pilot. that
See,
published that book, The Cutting Edge, that I had as a teenager. That I mean, looking at the pictures that he took of F-14s was very inspiring for me. But it seemed like such an impossible dream that I would ever get to fly one of those things, you know. And his photos were beautiful, and the inspiration for Top Gun. So I love his photography. But you know what's great about Heater, once you get to know him, is he's a great communicator. He was a Top Gun instructor, and a lot of people don't realize that mainly some of the main points of going to the fighter weapons school is to teach you how to be a teacher and how to communicate. And Heater is an exceptional communicator. And so what he brings to the table for training other folks and helping them understand the experience of being a naval aviator, it's outstanding. So that makes him one of my heroes too. And the other thing is, he's just such an interesting cat when you get to know him, is that he's always got things going on in his life. He's a man who's always staying busy, and he has a generous nature. So he's always wants to be inclusive of other people, and so he brings people into the fold and in a welcoming manner. And I always aspire to be like that. So he's a very impressive human being.
definitely, I agree. Definitely a human being. Maintainers, what do they mean to you? We cover this on every show. People don't realize that they are the most important part of our
Well,
aviation.
I would be remiss if I didn't mention that. I mean, my father was a mechanic in the Air Force, and I grew up with him training me to how to use tools correctly, how to work on engines. And so I had great respect for the work that it takes to rebuild an engine. And as an aviator, whenever I broke an airplane, if you overstress an airplane and it requires an inspection, or you overspeed a flap or slat, which you can do. I mean, the airplane allows you to make mistakes that can actually damage the airplane. And I always felt horrible when I had to go back to those maintainers and tell them that I was asking them to do work on an airplane that was my fault for for causing them to do work. But the great thing about maintainers is that there's this trust, right? When they come to me and they tell me that this is safe to fly, I have to trust them, right? And over years and years of my career, I have learned that to trust them. And they make mistakes too. Trust me. I mean, nobody's perfect, and that's part of aviation is this whole human factors thing. And they know they make mistakes, and they're doing their darndest. And all of our SOPs, when maintainers are working on airplanes, they have quality assurance inspections after they've completed their work. So now you have somebody else coming. So if it's critical work, there's usually several layers of barriers to failure, meaning the design, there might be warnings associated with it in the cockpit if it's not done correctly. They do the work and then it's inspected. So yeah, there's a lot there, and they're doing that. I mean, when you think about these airliners, right, a 777, it might fly from Tokyo to Los Angeles, to Atlanta, to Paris, back to JFK before anybody does anything other than inspect it and maybe put a little oil in the engine. And it's amazing to me sometimes how these airplanes can be in the air. They might only be on the ground for 2 hours for an international flight. In the case of the short haul guys, low cost carriers, Frontier, Southwest, JetBlue, their airplanes might only be on the ground for an hour, like at the gate itself for 45 minutes. I mean, they're like, get off, get on, off we go. And so the amazing reliability of these machines blows my mind sometimes. And then when they do require maintenance, typically a lot of it's just simple box changes. Oh, this radio's bad. They changed the radio. Oh, the lavatory isn't flushing correctly. They come and fix that, or the coffee maker's broken. I would say that 99% or well over 90% of the maintenance items that I see flying for the airlines are cabin items. I'm talking
Wow.
a broken tray table, a coffee maker, a seat that doesn't recline or won't come out of recline, those kind of things. It's very rare that we see major maintenance issues. And when we do, they do a wonderful job. I'm grateful for their work, because I know they're doing it around the clock, because many times those airplanes, the only time that they're able to work on them might be between midnight and 4 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah. So we are closing out early today. We normally go 45 minutes, but you and I have somewhere to be tonight. So again, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate you. And
yep, happy to be here as always.
Years ago, so amazing. Anybody else you like to shout out before we?
No, always Lorenzo and the F-14 Tomcat radio show and Tomcat University. Those guys do an amazing job with that show, and our goal with that whole presentation is to, those podcasts, they're available on YouTube and all the places that you can listen to podcasts. But our job, like you, we want to get the stories of the operators themselves, the folks out there that lived it, and hear what I would say, to get their best stories. We have F-14 crew members on there, and maintainers, and they come on and tell you their near-death experiences, or what it was like to fly, to fight, to land on carriers, all that stuff, and the perspectives are amazing. I really enjoy preserving that history, because I'll be honest with you, the stuff that I listened to as a kid, the World War II guys, reading the autobiographies of World War I, like Rickenbacker, and meeting, I got to meet quite a few of these, like Jimmy Doolittle, Chuck Yeager, folks like that are celebrities for us now, but they've passed. But documenting their stories is a worthwhile endeavor, in my opinion.
Well, very good. I'm going to put you in the green room. Hang tight for just 1 minute. I'll see you there in a bit. And thank you so much. And make sure, everybody, that you share this podcast. I actually going to be giving away a National Day calendar. That way you start celebrating every day. All you have to do is subscribe to Bucket List Coach Web Show, comment and share it to Facebook, and you'll be in the winnings. And you don't have to do it right away. I'm going to do a drawing on the last day of this month. So this is Cindy at Bucket List Coach Web Show Live, and Gerald Leekey, and we'll see you on the next podcast. Take care.
Thanks, Cindy.